Well, good morning, everybody. Is my mic on? Okay, I saw the green light, so I figured I was good, but it seems to happen every now and again. Welcome, everybody, to Grace Bible Chapel. We're so glad for everybody who's joining in online from home, and I am thankful for the few people in this room, so I'm not talking to no one. It's always a little bit awkward to do that. Here at GBC, over the past week, we've been trying to continue our celebration of the Christmas season, even after December 25th, which I know just sounds completely insane to do. But nevertheless, that's what we're trying to do here. Last week, Paulo spoke a little bit and filled us in on why this is a good thing and how it's actually regular practice in a lot of other parts of the world. I'm going to try to continue that as per Paulo's request. But it's going to take me a little bit to get there, so I just ask that you bear with me. I actually want to look ahead just a little bit at another season that's coming up very soon. It's a season that affects nearly every Canadian in some way. It's a bit of a more solemn time. It's not quite as happy as the Christmas season, but it's something that we just can't ignore. And of course, I'm talking about the winter blues. Yeah, the winter blues, that wonderful time of year where many of us feel down, a little unmotivated, and extra tired. See, personally, I've never felt the direct effects of it, but there's somebody in my family who every year seems to get a little bit more grumpy in the wintertime. They often have to run down south somewhere warm to cheer themselves up a little bit. But I've always been curious about this seasonal ailment, specifically what might be causing it. So I did a little bit of research, and for the most part, everyone seems to say a lot of the same things. They point out a couple similar possible causes and a couple similar possible treatments. We should all get more exercise, apparently. But for me, there was one thing that really stuck out. Nearly every single website I read through listed one common factor, and that is the cold and the dark days that come in the wintertime. I'm going to ask that you bear with me again here. I have a bit of a very long train of thought that I went through when I was thinking this stuff through on my own. You're going to see into the mechanisms of how my brain works, which is a bit of a scary thing to think about. But just bear with me here, and I'll try to take you through the thought process I had. So there's one thing that links darkness and coldness together that I found interesting, and that's that they're both negative descriptors. So what do I mean by that? Well, cold and dark, it's not an additive thing. You can't create cold and dark, and you can't really quantify it or measure it. So even temperature is strictly a measure of how much heat there is, how much thermal energy is in the system. That's why there's a such thing as absolute zero, which is zero heat. So the cold and the dark, they're not describing the addition of something, they're describing the subtraction of something that's missing. Something's cold if it's lacking heat, and something's dark if it's lacking light. And why do I find this interesting? Well, it highlights to me the significance of the absence of a thing. See, there's certain things in our lives that when we're missing them, they have a pretty significant impact on our lives. And the more I thought about it, most of our lives are centered around responding to the absence of something. So when we haven't had enough food, we feel hungry, and then that makes us do something, so we go and have a snack. If we hadn't had enough water, then we get thirsty, and we go and find some water and take a drink. And if we haven't had enough sleep, 7-month-old at home, we feel tired, and we try to have a nap sometime, anytime. See, each of these absences stirs up a desire in us. When something's missing, we feel like we need to go and get something. And desires end up playing a very important part in our lives. See, they give us the motivation we need to seek out necessary things. They help guide us by making sure that our needs are met. And this got me thinking about one specific desire that has plagued humanity since the beginning of time. It's one that's been very difficult to satisfy. It isn't exactly a physical desire like the ones I listed. It's not exactly a psychological desire either. It seems just barely beyond the scope of these things. If anything, the best word to describe it would be spiritual. It's a spiritual desire that we have. And it is meant to point us towards something, but this thing, the object of this desire, is more elusive and mysterious and difficult to define. It's hard to put our finger on it. See, as human beings, we have desires for things like meaning and purpose, joy and peace, some spark or passion that motivates us to get out of bed in the morning. We need some kind of reason to live. It's innate in us. It's not something we can avoid. But we run into a problem here. We can't seem to reliably satisfy this desire. It eludes us. It slips out of our fingers at every turn. In C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, he has a chapter that deals with this issue, and I want to take you through a little bit of his thoughts here. A quote from his book. "There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. I'm not now speaking of what would ordinarily be called unsuccessful marriages or holidays or learned careers. I'm speaking of the best possible ones. There was something we grasped at in the first moment of longing, which just fades away in the reality. The wife may be a good wife, and the hotels and scenery may have been excellent, and chemistry may have been a very interesting job, but something has evaded us." See, this unsatisfiable desire is something that drives all of us, but we always just seem to miss it. And that's one of the great struggles of life, is trying to make sense of this. What is this desire we have? What is this need? What's the object we're looking for? There's many different ways people have tried to tackle this, and C.S. Lewis points out two common models that people use that end up being unsuccessful. The first one he calls the fool's way. See, the fool's way is to try to satisfy this desire by finding the worldly pleasure that fits it just right. Each person may have a different object for this desire, but everyone just needs to find that one thing that will enrich their lives with meaning, purpose, and joy. So the fool spends their whole life chasing after it, jumping from one thing to another, until they hope they finally find that one thing that'll just make their life whole. If this was a successful way to fill this desire, we might accept people like celebrities to be the happiest people on earth. Who else has the resources, access to the most beautiful people? Who else has as much worldly pleasure as celebrities? And yet, I'm sure I don't have to convince you, they are some of the most miserable people on the planet. Unfortunately, the fool ends up ultimately dissatisfied, never able to find that one thing that's going to make them whole. And they end up blaming their dissatisfaction on the things that failed to satisfy. We've all heard people say, "I'm not happy because I'm married to the wrong person," or "I missed that job opportunity," or "I don't have a hobby that gives me meaning. I just don't have enough yet." So on and on they go, trading things out, spouses, jobs, hobbies, all hoping that they're going to find that one thing that's just right. See, C.S. Lewis's title as The Fool's Way is very appropriate because it highlights the insanity of this solution. We've all heard insanity can be defined as trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I don't see a better fit for this approach. They're trapped in an endless cycle, trying to find the next best thing that'll be the last best thing. It ends up robbing life of so much joy as regularly good things are crushed under the weight of our expectations. It gives us a lose-lose situation where we miss the thing that's going to satisfy our ultimate desire, and we lose so much of the good earthly pleasures that are here for us to enjoy. See, the fool needs to realize that absolutely nothing on earth will give them all the ultimate satisfaction in this life. And this is a good realization to make, but there's a danger to the realization, which brings us into Lewis's second model, the disillusioned, sensible man. See, if we aren't careful, this realization can lead us into this pitfall. This type of person has made the realization that nothing in life will give them ultimate satisfaction, but they then conclude that the desire itself is untrustworthy, that it's a young man's folly to think anything could possibly provide true fulfillment in life, and so they give up on it altogether. And there's a serious danger to this way of thinking as well. When we give up on life being ultimately fulfilling in some way, when we give up on the hope that we can find purpose, meaning, joy, and peace, we end up with a life that is ultimately unfulfilling, purposeless, and meaningless. See, while the fool at least has something to chase after, although it ends up being vapor, the sensible man, the disillusioned sensible man, has nothing. No motivation to get out of bed in the morning. It begs the question, if there's nothing that gives life meaning, why go on living? See, this problem plays into a philosophical school of thought called existentialism that very much has to confront this problem. See, the existentialists say that this is all we have, and they very much struggle with trying to make their way through a world that seems ultimately chaotic and without true purpose. As an example, I want to use Albert Camus and his paper called The Myth of Sisyphus. See, in this paper, he tries to find a way past this problem, and he uses the Greek mythological character of Sisyphus as an analogy for life in an existentialist model. Sisyphus was a man who eluded death a few times and was punished by the Greek god Zeus. The burden he was given was to roll a large boulder up a hill, and the catch was each time the boulder got close to the top, it would roll back down and he'd have to start over. Sisyphus ended up stuck in this endless cycle, trying to complete an essentially meaningless task. And this is a perfect analogy for the situation of the disillusioned man. See, each and every morning he wakes up, he's faced up with another essentially meaningless day. There's nothing to chase after. There's nothing to long for. It's just another day knowing that he's never going to find true fulfillment in life. The boulder will always end up back at the bottom of the hill. So again, why bother pushing it? Well, Camus does come up with something resembling an answer to this. A quote from his paper. "The universe henceforth without a master seems to Sisyphus neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." See, Camus' solution is to kiss the absurd, to embrace a world without meaning and revolt against meaning itself, and in the fight against meaning, to find some kind of meaning. So I had a couple questions here. So the meaning of life is to fight against meaning, and you're going to find meaning in that. But then when you find that meaning, do you start fighting against that meaning? And then in the fight against the meaning that you found from fighting against meaning, do you find more meaning? But then you have to fight against that meaning. So we end up in an infinite regress of fighting against new meaning that is discovered from fighting meaning. This sensible modern man, I think, is indeed disillusioned. See, you can't just sneak meaning in the back door by saying you find it by admitting that there is no meaning. It just doesn't make sense. When we try to erase the desire for ultimate satisfaction in life, we end up with a life that we can't justify carrying on, and thus we're back to our original problem, searching for the object that will satisfy this unsatisfiable desire. So, where does this leave us then? Nothing seems to satisfy this desire. Nothing seems to really fulfill us, but we really can't find a way to escape it. Why do we long for something we can't seem to have? Well, Lewis offers us what I think is a better solution. He says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. And this answers our problem. Just like hunger, thirst, and fatigue, our desire for joy, peace, meaning, purpose, satisfaction in life is meant to point us towards the source of these things. When we can't find these things in our world, it gives us sufficient evidence to look beyond our world, to some transcendent reality, one where all of our ultimate desires will be satisfied. And Christianity, by nature, gives us this solution. See, for a very long time in Christian thought, going all the way back to basically the beginning, there's been this idea that humanity is imprinted with a unique sense for the divine, for something greater than the material world. Thomas Aquinas says, "To know in a general and confused way that God exists is implanted in us by nature." John Calvin, "Since from the beginning of the world there has been no region, no city, in short, no household that could do without religion, there lies in this a tacit confession of our sense of deity inscribed in the hearts of all." There's a book I read by the Christian philosopher Alvin Plantinga, and he uses this whole idea of an innate sense of a transcendent reality to justify properly basic Christian belief, that being a rational belief in God that doesn't require any logical arguments. In the book of Romans, Paul also writes about these very things. From chapter 1, verse 20, he says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what was made, so that people are without excuse." See, God has designed us. He has designed the world so that he is evident, and especially to human beings. Human nature is intrinsically tied to God in a way that makes us naturally aware that there has to be something more than the here and now, than the material world and all of its pleasures. And this awareness of the divine is what stirs up the desire for something more. Paul makes this more clear later in Romans chapter 8. Starting at verse 18, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God." See, our frustration with the things that decay in the world, the pleasures that just slip out of our grasp and dull over time, our existential angst is meant to serve a purpose. It's meant to stir up the emotions and lead us to seek out a transcendent reality, the God of the universe. But the purpose of this desire is even greater than just helping us discover God. We're never meant to stop chasing the desire for God. Continuing Paul's writing from chapter 8, "We know that the whole creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not have yet, we wait for it patiently." See, C.S. Lewis makes the same conclusion in his chapter on this issue, when he says, "Looking forward to the eternal world is not a form of escapism or wishful thinking, but one of the things a Christian's meant to do." Embracing this mindset of looking forward, of hoping, and of chasing after the God of the universe and the transcendent reality is something Christians are just meant to do. And when we embrace this mindset of eager anticipation, it does good for us in this world. See, when we fix our eyes on heaven, suddenly all of the other earthly pleasures are enriched because they remind us of the hope we have in Jesus. When you see a beautiful landscape, it suddenly stirs up awe and wonder at the creativity of our God. It makes you anticipate the beautiful things he's going to make for us when he makes us all whole again. When we're surrounded by family and friends and we enjoy the fellowship, the experience is heightened as we anticipate union, fellowship with our Heavenly Father. Every melody becomes a song of worship, every sunrise an explosion of God's majesty, and every meal a gracious gift from our Father above. Life is enriched in every single way when we fix our eyes on heaven. And I know this seems like an easy thing for a Christian to say. You just need to focus on God in heaven. But man, is it easy for us to lose focus of this. See, just a few weeks ago, my family had an experience that really made me set my focus on it. Right before Christmas, the Wilmsley clan got COVID-19. And so we immediately canceled all of our regular Christmas traditions, including turkey dinners, having family over, Christmas Eve services, and gift exchanges. Over the next couple of days, the winter blues hit us early. Our whole season was overshadowed, and many of us were feeling extremely down. It felt like our Christmas had been ripped from our hands, taken from us, and ruined by circumstances outside of our control. And I remember feeling all of this, the angst and the frustration with missing everything that I held dear. And eventually one day when I was feeling particularly down, something hit me. See, all of these traditions weren't really that special in and of themselves. A turkey dinner, this might be controversial, but isn't that great. Turkey isn't the best meat. And we have it a few times a year anyways. Gift exchanges can really happen anytime. Church services ideally happen every week when we don't have to shut it all down. See, none of these things in and of themselves are particularly special or meaningful. But it's the thing behind them. It's the thing that they point us towards that gives them true, rich meaning. They're meant to point us towards the greatest time in the history of the world, where our Savior came down in the form of a baby, lived a perfect life, gave us the blueprints to satisfy our ultimate desire, and then gave us the means in which to do it. See, in reality, there is nothing that stole Christmas from us. There's nothing that stopped us from celebrating Christmas in the only way that really mattered. See, we could still celebrate the birth of Jesus. We could still praise the Father for his ultimate expression of love for us. And we can still continue in our eager expectation for him to come back. As I was reflecting on all of this, I couldn't help but consider the season of Advent we just finished and the season of Advent that we live in each and every day. See, it's always fun leading up to Christmas, just getting more and more excited for that day when we celebrate Jesus coming. But each and every day as Christians, we live in a season of Advent. Christ is coming again, sometime very soon, as we've been told. We wait eagerly for that day to come. That day when every unmet desire is going to be fulfilled in ways we can't even begin to imagine. I'm very much looking forward to that day. But until then, let's be sustained by the hope that we have for things to come. And let's experience the enriching impact it has in our lives in each and every way.